Alright, so we're going to be doing a basic cut test. It's the Puko from Losty Forge. Pretty sweet blade. We got some good saplings in front of us to try out a tri-stick on, or my version of it. Good enough to test these out. So we just need to pick the right diameter. Thinking this nice little guy back here. Beautifully done. No problem there. All right, what I have here is just scraps from projects that I work on, and I take them out and it makes perfect kindling. So we're gonna give both the Losty Forge Puko a run, and what I'm calling the Losty Forge, I'm naming it myself, at least for now, the Nugget. I absolutely love this little nugget of a knife. Already has a split in it. Good, no immediate damage. It's always a good sign. This is a thick enough blade that I'm not worried at all. Like, you can see the thickness on this bad boy. It's pretty thick for a Puko style blade. You can use the Morska method, or that's where I learned it from, where you insert, wiggle back and forth, and your hand acts as a stop. So we got a bit of a knot there, so we need to move over. There we go. Here's another method, semi-dangerous. Never seen anyone do it like this, but you can also, if you're very, very careful, start your cuts that way. So like I said, you got to be very careful doing that. I don't necessarily advise that kind of method. Alright, we'll split this stuff down a little farther and get back to you. Alright, we're going to be testing out feather sticks here, seeing how well these guys feather. My initial test on this is they did great. Easy, beautiful curls. Would not call this like I'm sitting here trying to make the best feather sticks in the world. I just want to create a fire to make a little lunch, and normally I think that's good enough for me, right? These like to bite really deep on the geometry of this, but you can also go really, really fine with it as well. All right, we're gonna see how the nugget splits. Absolutely no problem at all. Very nice. Beautiful. I'm noticing that if you're not going to be hyper focused on trying to make the best curls ever, that the thickness of the blade and coming down to a Scandi, it makes it want to bite really, really deep, really, really quickly. So you need just the right wood to do like super, super fine curls. This stuff is great tinder. I need to find a better stick or take a little bit extra time to do the finer curls. I usually only do the finer curls as well if I'm lighting just the curls from a ferro rod, but we're going to be using the prepared fire starting device today, so I'm not super worried about it.
Once you get groove down and get the stick just right, it's kind of great.
Alright, I just wanted to show what these blades look like on your side real quick. I got both of them on me today. Probably would only normally carry one at a time. I've carried both for 24 hours now, or so. Maybe not full 24 hours, but you know, a whole work day each. And this arrowhead style sheath is a little bit more comfortable and compact, but it is a smaller knife. It's also easier to get access to the blade, just slightly. But the Puko has a swell on the end of it that actually makes it a little bit easier to take out of this particular sheath. They both done well for what they are, so can't say I'm disappointed in that. Alright, so we're going to be working on a kind of a tri-stick idea, and we're going to be testing both of these bad boys out. I'll go ahead and give you a close-up. Alright, so this is what I'm calling the Nugget. I dig this arrowhead style sheath. He did a really good job. The burnishing is good all the way around as well. A lot of people don't burnish these particular edges on the belt loops. And they're not as burnished as these edges, but that's just a little bit extra attention to detail that I appreciate. So you can see the knife, it's about the size of the palm of my hand. We'll talk about fit a little bit down the line here. We're just testing them out. I already have in mind what I like and don't like about the particular fits of the blades, but you can see they both fit in my particular hand pretty perfectly as far as spacing goes. I love the Nugget. I love this knife, man.
Alright, we will commence the test here. We need to cut this stick to length, get rid of these bad boys here. Alright, so let's make this first one about there. Blade's nice and deep, no issues there. Beautiful. That's what we'll be working on with the Puko. And then the Nuggets. Do right about here. Bite's about the same. I think both of these blades, well, I'd say the grind is a little finer and comes back a little farther on the Nugget than the Puko. Noted. Beautiful.
We'll make it a steak out of one end. Very easily done there. Chamfer the end up here, so we'll need to get rid of all of this. So when making a steak, you need to have a tough, durable end to bang on. You can chamfer that way, or you can go around like this as well. The reason you chamfer around the edges is when you're pounding on them, the tops will split. They're less likely to split and they have more strength when you do something like that. All right, so we got our basic steak there. So we'll do a pot hook down here. We'll do it right here. Can it Bushcraft? I'm loving, this is greenwood, by the way, if you haven't noticed yet. Cuts really nicely into greenwood. Rocking cuts nice and deep. It's been a long time since I worked with greenwood. Carves so nicely compared to drywood. Holy. And that's just you know, be nice to the environment, not take what's not necessary. Greenwood carves way more beautifully than anything dry probably ever will, except maybe like balsa or cedar. But the reason, you know, just keep stuff for future. You know, there's plenty of dead wood down everywhere. I like working with this tip, even though it's pretty fat. It's still nimble enough to be able to get into these little sections. It'll be interesting to see how that changes over time of sharpening the blade. You might have to reduce a little bit. You know, I think that'll do. Very nice. All right, the next cut we'll be working on is going to just be a notch. A basic kind of square notch here. I was thinking that I would like a longer version of this blade. I think I would. But actually, this one is just perfect for working close up with the tip and not having to maneuver around your hand on the blade a lot, which I really dig. I can just keep my hand in one place. And you know, everybody's hand lengths and finger lengths are different, so everyone's gonna have a different experience a little bit in that category. Yeah, that tip's just nice enough to be able to get in these notches pretty easily. Next notch that I normally use, I don't use a lot of the notches for tri-sticks. I just haven't got into needing all of them. So you can already know that the basic V-notch is probably going to end up pretty easily here. Alright, and for our purposes, we'll do two more. We got the V, we'll do the U. Alright, that's super basic, super easy. You can make that as deep or not as deep as you want. That's for sitting on other logs and lashings. And last one we'll do is we'll do the square peg all the way around. There's a lot of other ones. I don't particularly ever use them, so for the purpose of this testing, we won't do them. All right, so for all intents and purposes, it's not perfect, but I don't plan on using it for anything. We're just giving this little nugget a run, and did just fine. All right, now to the puko. Second verse, same as the first. I usually do the thinner end, the stake. You know, this already has more leverage. Something I find a little bit difficult about this knife, just wielding it, is this swell right here is a little bit too big for my particular hand. And I've had 3 other guys put hands on this, and their hands are too long for the handle here. So this needs to be extended out a little bit to fit, you know, a majority of guys' hands, I think. And this needs to be slimmed down just a little bit for it to be super, super comfortable. The way it is right now, it makes your hand kind of lock into this forward position and only there, which is fine to a degree. Like right now, doing these power cuts, it doesn't feel bad. But it is a little big, and it is a little bulky up in here, causing maybe a little bit of a hot spot. So we'll see as we go through. Now we'll do our pot hanger. Now this blade, it does come down thicker. Yeah, just a little bit thicker, and this closer up to the edge. We'll see how that does for us. It still bites deep, but it kind of seems to want to seat at a certain level. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. That tip. Oh, that's nice. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It is harder to work up on this inner portion of the blade here. It's a little bit more unwieldy. So how I'm holding it right there, my fingers almost are not long enough to wrap around and give me enough leverage because of this swell in here. I'm just immediately noticing that. So to do a lot of super fine stuff, this tip is great. Yeah, it's not as comfortable to choke up on it and get in close. Don't get me wrong, it's still fine. Like, I would be happy to use either one of these. It does like to hog off more quickly, it feels like. But, that's kind of an interesting... It's almost like an axe. When you have an axe that's more obtuse, stuff peels away quicker versus it biting deeper and then having a little bit harder of a time chunking the wood out of that particular split or wedge or whatever. So this one has a little bit easier of a time getting little chunks out of there. This one likes to bind up just a little bit, so you have to come and do some relief cuts versus this one just being able to kind of pop them out. So a bit of give and take between the two. It's interesting. Thought I'd give you a little bit of a close-up here. You can see the tip gets in there quite nicely. Alright, basic V-notch. And the U-notch we won't do in this one. It's kind of repetitive. It's just the wider, smoother V-notch. Doesn't really matter. Or maybe we'll just make this one that. There you go. Nice and easy. Alright. Good enough. Last one. We'll do the square notch all the way around. I will say that these spines have a nice sharp edge. Not sharp enough to cut you, but sharp enough to be uncomfortable, which is just a little bit of a sacrifice if you want a nice sharp spine to be able to work with. So I'm okay with that. That's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Yeah, it has a limit to where it likes to bite into, whereas with a nugget, you can get down a little deeper and pop those off a little easier. And that's just, you know, we could back that grind up just a little bit. And seeing as this is not a chopper, that wouldn't be that big of a deal to remove some, like I wouldn't chop with this blade. I think that I could do it, but, you know, there are choppers for chopping. I mean, I guess if you had nothing else, but there's methods to the madness when using each different blade. Yeah, having that limit, I like to bite deeper and then do a cut. I just have to do a few extra, you know, cuts every single time. And, you know, if you're not in a hurry, that's not a big deal, but if you are in a hurry, it causes you a little extra time. I think that could be remedied. Yeah, right there. It really doesn't want to go much deeper than that. Whereas this one, get this out of the way. Oh yeah, it can definitely go a little bit deeper. It's actually nice to use them as companion knives. That's what I do with Moras. I'll have a really thin Mora grind, and then I'll have a thicker one, and I'll keep both of them, and I'll keep alternating between the two. I know a lot of people may not like doing something like that. Maybe they want a one dual knife, or, you know, you might just have to take a little bit extra time. Yeah, this one doesn't, even though the tip's really nice, this cutting down straight, I have to do a little bit more effort. You know, that might be a thing to consider for children or anyone starting out. They're going to want to be taking shallower cuts for their projects anyway. I kind of like to hog it off and get through it because I've been around. So let's see here, like for example, yeah, you can just take those off one at a time. This one you kind of have to do a little bit of, it kind of gets bound up a little bit right there. Trying to think of a positive for not cutting deep enough. You know, like children starting out, maybe they want to take shallower cuts so they're not putting so much force into stuff. Because if you're just carving lightly, it's not, you're not going to notice, most likely. Or just doing smaller cuts all the way around to start. Every knife works differently, you know? So for example, I like using the tip to get in these tighter places, more so on this one, but not enough more for me to maybe put that knife down just to use the tip on this blade, when you could have generally a smaller blade to begin with than that to get in here. Alright, so some final thoughts here. They both did the job, right? The Puko, I found that I only really enjoyed using this portion of the blade here, especially the tip. This portion of the blade, there's not enough meat ground off in my opinion, and it really suffers in these down push cuts to get material off. Like, you have to put a little bit of extra pressure or doing a lot. I was finding myself doing a lot of rocking cuts here. Which, I mean, that's not uncommon to have to do. With this swell right here, I found myself locked up in here and a lot of times sitting on the edge right here. So I would like to see this taken down a bit, and maybe if there's going to be some kind of finger choil in here, maybe a little bit deeper to lock your finger in there, because a lot of times my hand was right there, right basically on the blade, not on the blade, because it does have a little bit of a sharpening choil there, but like I wasn't worried about it at all. but that's where my hand kind of just wants to lock up into, and it really does not want to move very friendly around the rest of the knife. I did enjoy this taper here. That was nice. But the usefulness of it was slightly destroyed by being locked in by this little bit of a bulbous thing going on right there. I do like the flared out handle. It locks the palm in really nicely. But the problem is a lot of times I'm so focused on doing work up in here that my hand's not even locked up in the back of here. So yeah, definitely some improvements. Take this meat back a little bit here. The tip seemed fine, and if it was even just a tiny bit finer, which you probably would end up doing, just taking the meat off here anyway, this tip would be perfect. Now this one, after switching between the two, this one feels more of like a mini pry bar, but not a pry bar that you can't wield. Like, it's very wieldy as far as pry bars go, right? It's a little bit harder to get into maybe some of these sections, but not really, because I mean, it's not that fat, right? The spine is, but I don't know, depending on what size your notches are and stuff like that. I would like maybe a little bit more meat in the handle this way, just a tiny bit. I mean a fraction, right? Just so it fills out in the hand a little better, but mainly so you can taper these edges into more of a round deal like this one's got going. Otherwise, I don't think I have any particular complaints at all about this one. Both the spines are sharp. Not sharp enough to cut, but definitely sharp enough to do all the things that you would need with a sharp spine. So for example, scraping does a fine job at that. No issue there. Both of the spines you can see collecting on there. You can see both the spines plenty sharp for that. Not sharp enough to cut your fingers because I have been pressing pretty hard into here, but definitely sharp enough for a ferro rod. So no issues there. I enjoyed using both of these. They both complemented each other. So I found that not being able to get too far or too close to this tip over here, it's a little bit harder to get this square notch accurate compared to this other one. It's a little bit wonky and scawampus, and even though I like using the tip, it's a little far away from, generally you'd have to choke up a little bit farther, and since this blade is already right there, I had an easier time doing it. And this blade it's not friendly to choke up on. How bulbous this is, you don't get a good lock or anything. You're just basically holding the blade, and it's handle heavy, as you can see. But if I'm going to be choking all the way up here, there's a lot of weight swinging down in there. So that may be neither here nor there for you, depending on your preferences. But yeah, so those are my results. I did notice that when cutting down this tree, usually I would only use the inside of the blade here, closer to the handle, to put those pressure cuts, bending the tree. And I didn't know it at the time. I was having a little bit of a difficult time doing it. And like, not hard, right? But harder than a Mora or this blade, because it likes to stop at a certain point. So some interesting observations there. I think once those improvements are made, I think this would be an absolutely lovely knife. And maybe even a shorter version as far as blades go. If you take this tip down a little bit, it'd be easier to wield and get, like, let's say the tip's like right here. That'd almost be perfect. Otherwise, you can make it really, really big and have kind of a meaty chopper of this style as well. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to chop with this blade, but something got me thinking that if this angle is a little bit more obtuse, it still does carving, but it might actually be good for chopping as well. So we're going to give a little bit. This is green wood. If it has an issue with this, then it's going to have an issue with a lot of things. So we're going to give this a little bit of a test here. Interesting. If you choke up on the handle here, it actually does a pretty good job at chopping. I would find it odd to particularly chop with this kind of blade. But, so if you keep that grind where it's at, I think you're not going to have an issue with chopping, because it'll be able to do chopping and carving. It won't be able to do both the best that it can probably, but it'll be able to do both decently. And you can choke up on that really nicely right there. So we'll give it a couple, we'll do another, we'll go round chop on this one. Okay, so that's actually pretty useful. I didn't think that was going to be useful on this blade, but if you had a purpose for it, breaking down these stakes and you didn't have an axe or a saw or whatever, this, even though, you know, generally it's not the biggest blade ever, it actually surprisingly does pretty good at chopping. That is, I am impressed by that. So you know what? That's actually kind of fun. You can see you can create your notches pretty easily that way. Not the safest way to be doing it, but so observation, that did work, and obviously no damage to the blade. So there is that little choke up right there. And because of the swell right here, your hand doesn't want to slide up because of this pinched area down here, and it hugs this quite nicely. It just locks in there for those chops. Yeah, all right, interesting that a blade of this size has that ability. So, you know, I'll give it props and points for that for sure. Cool. Just stick for another project some other time. That'll do. Broke down that pretty quick.